Can you solve all these intermolecular forces questions? Kinetic refers to.
Excellent. Motion is a brilliant choice. Ion and a polar molecule.
Smart move. Ion dipole forces is an accurate answer. H atom bonded to N, OF. Great thinking. Hydrogen bonds is the right choice. Imps are all dash forces.
On track. Electrostatic is the correct answer.
What causes gases to exist? Exactly. Weak intermolecular forces makes sense, and it is right choice.
Exist between polar molecules.
Solid response. Dipole-dipole forces is a valid choice. Identify the imp exist in H3. Smart pick. Hydrogen bonding is the correct choice. Intermolecular forces for UNF. Right again. Hydrogen bonding is a valid answer. Which force is present in He? Great job. Dipole-dipole is the accurate answer. Chi2 molecules can form dash? Nicely done. Dipole-dipole forces is a solid answer. The picture is example of dash. You got it? Your choice dipole-dipole forces is right. Which of these is the weakest? Excellent choice. Dipole-induced dipole forces is the right answer. What keeps the molecules intact? Clear logic. Your choice intermolecular forces is sound and 100% true. Surface tension arises from dash. Strong choice. Cohesive forces is the right answer. Weakest intermolecular forces is. You chose London dispersion forces, and it is correct. Which of these has London forces? Good thinking. I2 is the right answer. Weak intermolecular forces causes. Valid point. Low boiling point is true. London force is also known as dash. Right choice. Dispersion force is the best answer. Two types of van der Waals forces. You're right. Dipole-dipole interaction is the correct answer. Vapor pressure can be influenced by. Perfect. Both is the correct choice. Which is the strongest force below? Correct. Ionic bond is the right answer. What is the predominant imp for NH3? Sharp thinking. Hydrogen bonding is the right choice. Exists between all atoms and molecules. Correct response. London dispersion forces is the most accurate answer. What causes London dispersion forces? Well reasoned. Movement of electrons is the correct choice. Which force is broken when water boils? Well done. Hydrogen bonding is the right choice. It is the weakest intermolecular force. Bravo, dispersion forces is the answer. What is the bond polarity determined by? Well picked. Electronegativity is the correct answer. What intermolecular forces does H2s have? Nice work. You chose dipole to dipole, and it is correct. What is the intermolecular forces in H3? Good job. Your answer hydrogen bonding works well here. These are forces between liquid molecules. Nice selection.
Cohesive forces is the correct and valid answer.
Hydrogen bonding is a special case of dash.
Well done. Dipole-dipole attractions is the right choice.
H2S has what kind of intermolecular force?
Well picked. Dipole-dipole is the correct answer.
London dispersion forces are the result of. Perfect. Temporary dipoles is the correct choice. The strongest intermolecular force is dash. Excellent.
Hydrogen bonding is a brilliant choice.
Type of intermolecular force present in if. Brach bond is the answer. Determine the type of forces present in psi.
Smart move. Covalent bond is an accurate answer.
Examples of an intermolecular force include. You're right. All of the above is the correct answer. Generally, these forces exist in all compound. Exactly. London dispersion forces makes sense and it is right choice. What causes temporary dipoles in molecules? Right choice. London dispersion forces is the best answer, which is not a kind of intermolecular force.
Nicely done. Covalent bond is a solid answer.
Raindrops are spherical in shape because of.
Nice work. You chose surface tension, and it is correct.
What type of force is found within a molecule?
On track. Intermolecular forces is the correct answer.
Dash a force of attraction between molecules. Correct response. Intermolecular force is the most accurate answer. What is another name for van der Waals force?
You got it. Your choice, all of the above, is right.
Which type of bonding force is the strongest?
Solid response. Covalent bonds is a valid choice.
Which intermolecular force is present in Cl2? Great thinking. London dispersion is the right choice. Which of the following forces is the weakest? Correct. Covalent bond is the right answer. Which molecules exhibit dipole-dipole forces? Good thinking. Polar molecules is the right answer. A force that hold atoms together in a molecule. Strong choice. Intramolecular is the right answer. In ionic solids, what holds the ions together? Smart pick. Ionic bonds is the correct choice. What type of bonds are found in salt crystals? Right again. Ionic forces is a valid answer. Strongest intermolecular force present in alkyl. Valid point. Dipole-dipole is true. Which of these forces is always the strongest? Sharp thinking. Ionic bonds is the right choice. Water droplets are mainly formed by what force? Great job. Hydrogen bonding is the accurate answer. What is the main intermolecular force in Cuc2?
Well reasoned. Ion dipole is the correct choice.
Identify the intermolecular forces exist in NH3. Clear logic. Your choice hydrogen bonding is sound and 100% true. NH3 and F is example of molecule that has. Good job. Your answer hydrogen bond works well here. Which of these has the strongest London forces? You chose I2, and it is correct. Which of the following forces is intermolecular?
Excellent choice. Ion dipole is the right answer.
What types of forces exist between I2 molecules? Nice selection. Dispersion forces is the correct and valid answer. Force of attraction that exist between molecules.
Bravo. Intermolecular force is the answer.
What causes dispersion forces between molecules? Nice work. You chose motion of electrons, and it is correct. Polar molecules are mainly held together by dash. Well picked. Dipole-dipole interactions is the correct answer. Which type of bonding is never found in elements? Correct. Polar covalent is the right answer. Hydrogen bonding is a special type of what force? On track. Dipole-dipole forces is the correct answer. Which of these has only London dispersion forces? Excellent choice. A 2 is the right answer. Which intermolecular force do all molecules have? Great thinking. London dispersion forces is the right choice. Which molecule exhibits London dispersion forces? Well done. Carbon dioxide is the right choice. The intermolecular force present in all matter is? Exactly. London or dispersion makes sense, and it is right choice. Which of these has the largest dispersion forces? Nicely done. High is a solid answer. What forces exist between ions in ionic compounds? Good thinking. Ionic forces is the right answer. The resistance of liquids to flow, the thickness. Perfect. Viscosity is the correct choice. What could make London dispersion forces stronger?
Strong choice. Molecules with more electrons is the right answer.
The intermolecular force between nacelle particles is? Solid response. Unique is a valid choice. Which halogen has the strongest dispersion forces? Good job. Your answer, iodine, works well here. Which is the strongest intermolecular force below? Smart move. Dipole-dipole is an accurate answer. As intermolecular forces increase, dash increases. Valid point. Surface tension is true. Intermolecular forces are attractions between dash. Great job. Neighboring molecules is the accurate answer. What is the most important IMF exhibited by water? You're right. Hydrogen bonding is the correct answer. What is another name for London dispersion forces? Nice selection. Van der Waals forces is the correct and valid answer. What are the strongest intermolecular attractions? Smart pick. Ionic forces is the correct choice. The intermolecular forces in a crystal of ice are? You chose hydrogen bonds, and it is correct. Dipole-dipole forces often deal with dash molecules. Right choice. Polar is the best answer. Intermolecular force present between HCl molecules. You got it. Your choice dipole-dipole is right. The force of attraction between nonpolar molecules. Well reasoned.
LDF is the correct choice.
Which substance has permanent dipole-dipole forces? Excellent. Shasha is a brilliant choice. What type of forces attract one molecule to another?
Right again. Intermolecular forces is a valid answer.
What type of intermolecular forces does water have? Correct response. All of the above is the most accurate answer. Which force is broken when helium turns into a gas? Sharp thinking. London dispersion forces is the right choice. What is the strongest intermolecular force in N2H2?
Clear logic. Your choice hydrogen bonding is sound and 100% true.
What type of bonding is found between Cl2 molecules? Excellent choice. Van der Waals forces is the right answer. What is the intermolecular force for this substance? Exactly. Hydrogen bonding makes sense, and it is right choice. F2 would contain what type of intermolecular forces? Right again. Dispersion is a valid answer.
Nonpolar molecules all contain. Clear logic. Your choice London dispersion forces is sound and 100% true.
Which is not a bond but is an intermolecular force?
Right choice. Hydrogen bond is the best answer.
Which of these has the weakest van der Waals forces? Sharp thinking. Helium is the right choice. What type of intermolecular force is present in Bra2? Excellent. London dispersion forces is a brilliant choice. What type of force do gecko feet use to climb walls? You got it. Your choice van der Waals forces is right. Which type of intermolecular force is the strongest? Nice work. You chose hydrogen bonding and it is correct. Which among the following are van der Waals forces? Nice selection. Dipole forces is the correct and valid answer. Which molecule has the weakest intermolecular forces?
Strong choice. Helium is the right answer.
The following are the weakest intermolecular forces. On track. Went to London is the correct answer. It refers to the interaction between polar molecules. Valid point. Dipole-dipole interactions is true. Which of the following is the strongest type of bond? Well done. Covalent is the right choice. What is the main difference between liquids and gases? You chose intermolecular forces, and it is correct. What kind of bonds are constantly broken and reformed? Great thinking. Dispersion forces is the right choice. Unusually strong dipole-dipole attractions are called. Well reasoned. Hydrogen bonding is the correct choice. Which force is present between all atoms and molecules? You're right. London dispersion forces is the correct answer. What is the weakest intermolecular force that H pair has? Well picked. London dispersion force is the correct answer. Identify the type of force that holds the knuckle-2. Smart pick. Ion dipole force is the correct choice. What are the three main types of intermolecular forces? N,
Solid response. Hydrogen bonding is a valid choice.
Which substance is held together only by London forces? N2 is the answer.
Which are the predominant intermolecular forces in Hebra?
Correct response. Dipole-dipole is the most accurate answer.
Dash is the strongest kind of intermolecular force seen.
Nicely done. Hydrogen bonds is a solid answer. Which of these molecules experienced van der Waals forces?
Good thinking. CH4 is the right answer.
How do electrons play a role in London dispersion forces? Great job. They create temporary dipoles is the accurate answer. It is the attractive forces that exist between molecules. Perfect. Intramolecular force is the correct choice. Which is the strongest intermolecular force that HATSO has? Good job. Your answer, hydrogen bonding, works well here. Which intermolecular forces are present in phosphorus, P4? Smart move. Dispersion forces is an accurate answer. What is the main type of force between Mg2 plus ions and CH3? Correct. Ion dipole forces is the right answer. What causes water molecules to be attracted to each other? Nicely done. Hydrogen bonding is a solid answer. What is the force of attraction present between molecules? Clear logic. Your choice, intermolecular forces, is sound and 100% true. Which of given molecules experience dipole-dipole forces? Good job. Your answer, Chitrikel, works well here. Which is the strongest intermolecular force of attraction? Great job. Hydrogen bonds is the accurate answer. Which intermolecular forces are present in silicon dioxide? Right choice. No intermolecular forces is the best answer. The following are examples of van der Waals forces except. Exactly. Hydrogen bonds make sense, and it is right choice. What intermolecular force present in a sample of pure alkyl? On track. Dipole-dipole attraction is the correct answer. The more polar the molecule, the stronger dash forces are. Smart move. Dipole-dipole is an accurate answer. Which has the strongest forces between particles? Strong choice. Ionic bonding is the right answer. What types of intermolecular forces are acting in the knuckle? Bravo. Dipole-dipole forces is the answer. Which intermolecular force is experienced by all molecules? Correct response. London dispersion forces is the most accurate answer. It is a force of attraction that exists in polar molecules. You got it? Your choice, dipole-dipole, is right. It refers to the interaction between two charged particles. Well picked. Ion-ion interaction is the correct answer. Hydrocarbons will have which type of intermolecular forces? Excellent. Idid forces is a brilliant choice. What is the highest intermolecular force for this molecule? Nice selection. Hydrogen bonding is the correct and valid answer. What intermolecular forces are present in gaseous hydrogen? Correct. Van der Waals forces is the right answer. Bonding of metal and non-metal.
You chose ionic bonding, and it is correct.
Intermolecular forces present in a sample of HVl molecules.
Valid point. Dipole-dipole is true.
It is the force that holds atoms together within a molecule. Well done. Intramolecular forces is the right choice. Dash have the strongest intermolecular forces of attraction. Solid response. Ion dipole is a valid choice. Only polar molecules feel this kind of intermolecular forces.
You're right. Dipole-dipole is the correct answer.
These are the attractive forces that occur between molecules. Good thinking. Intermolecular forces is the right answer. What type of intermolecular forces holds liquid N2 together? Right again. London forces is a valid answer. What type of forces are attractive forces between molecules? Great thinking. Intermolecular forces is the right choice. In CH3CH2, which intermolecular force is the strongest? Nice work. You chose hydrogen bonding, and it is correct. Which intermolecular force found in CH2 is the strongest? Sharp thinking. Dipole-dipole forces is the right choice. Which of the following is not a type of van der Waals force? Smart pick. Hydrogen bonds is the correct choice. How are intermolecular spaces in solids compared to liquids? Perfect. Closer together is the correct choice. What type of intermolecular force would be in pure copper Cu? Excellent choice. Metallic bonding is the right answer. The weakest type of intermolecular force between molecules is? Well reasoned. Dispersion forces is the correct choice. Which intermolecular forces are present in tetrachloromethane? On track. Dispersion forces is the correct answer. In which sample would ion-ion forces of attraction be present? Nice work. You chose the most important, and it is correct. Of the following, which is the strongest intermolecular force? Solid response. In-dipole interactions is a valid choice. The toughness of the skin of a liquid is a measure of its dash. You got it. Your choice surface tension is right. Which of the following does not contain intermolecular forces? Oh. Well done. MOGO is the right choice. Which of following forces is the weakest intermolecular force? Correct response. Van der Waals forces is the most accurate answer. More mass, stronger gravity, more mass, Van der Waals forces. Strong choice. A stronger is the right answer. Which of the following compounds exhibit dipole-dipole forces? Well reasoned. IL is the correct choice. A substance that has a high surface tension probably also has. You chose a high boiling point, and it is correct. Forces that exist among noble gas atoms and nonpolar molecules. Well picked. London dispersion forces is the correct answer. Which type of force is inside the molecule and forms molecules? Valid point. Intramolecular force is true. Which type of intermolecular forces explains why I2 is a solid? Nice selection.
Dispersion is the correct and valid answer.
London dispersion forces exist between dash atoms and molecules.
Excellent choice. All is the right answer.
Which among the molecules has highest London dispersion forces?
Smart move. I2 is an accurate answer.
What type of forces hold together nonpolar molecules and atoms?
Sharp thinking. London dispersion forces is the right choice.
London dispersion forces occur in all molecules, even dash ones.
Good job. Your answer nonpolar works well here.
Which intermolecular force is the strongest in pure substances?
Good thinking. Hydrogen bonding is the right answer.
What are the intermolecular forces of attraction for argon?
Clear logic. Your choice dispersion forces is sound and 100% true.
What is the reason for ethanol being less volatile than bromine? Great job. Stronger hydrogen bonds is the accurate answer.
These are forces between liquid molecules and another substance.
Bravo. Adhesive forces is the answer.
Which of the following is an example of an intermolecular force?
Right choice. Hydrogen bond is the best answer.
Determine the type of intermolecular force present in sand, CO2.
Nicely done. Covalent bond is a solid answer.
An intermolecular force of attraction between two polar molecules.
Excellent. Dipole-dipole is a brilliant choice.
What is the intermolecular force exists between molecules of Ber2?
Exactly. Dispersion force makes sense and it is right choice.
A dipole-dipole force is a dash force that is stronger than dash.
Perfect. Intermolecular London dispersion force is the correct choice.
Which type of intermolecular force relies on an induced dipole?
Great thinking. London dispersion forces is the right choice.
What is the strongest type of intermolecular force present in if?
Correct. H-bond is the right answer. Type of intermolecular force present in nonpolar A2, Ber2, and Cl2.
Smart pick. London dispersion is the correct choice.
What property determines the strength of London dispersion forces? Right again. Polarizability is a valid answer. Intramolecular forces are forces dash a molecule or ionic compound.
You're right. Within is the correct answer.
Which of the following among the intermolecular forces is weakest?
Good thinking. Dispersion force is the right answer.
Which of these following has the strongest London dispersion forces?
Exactly. A2 makes sense and it is right choice.
What is the compound that is only held by London dispersion forces? Nice selection. Cesif2 is the correct and valid answer.
Ammonia Nh3 would have what type of intermolecular forces, if any?
You got it. Your choice hydrogen bonding is right.
What type of intermolecular force is present in carbon dioxide gas? You chose London dispersion force, and it is correct.
Which term represents an intermolecular force in a sample of water?
Great thinking. Hydrogen bonding is the right choice.
Which state of matter has the strongest intermolecular attractions?
Sharp thinking. Solid is the right choice. Which of the following are the intermolecular forces present in tow? Valid point. Hydrogen bonding is true.
The strongest intermolecular force present in HKl, a polar compound.
Great job. Dipole-dipole is the accurate answer. This breaks up the intermolecular forces on the surface of a liquid.
On track. Surfactants is the correct answer.
Strongest type of intermolecular force present between F molecules.
Right again. Hydrogen bonding is a valid answer.
Select all of the intermolecular forces act upon nonpolar particles.
Well picked. London dispersion forces is the correct answer.
Increasing London dispersion forces makes it dash to separate atoms.
Excellent. Harder is a brilliant choice. What type of intermolecular force affects the volatility of a liquid? Right choice. Dispersion force is the best answer. Which of the following compound has the weakest van der Waals forces? Nicely done. Right is a solid answer. What type of intermolecular forces are present between CO2 molecules? Smart move. London dispersion is an accurate answer.
An attractive force that acts between a molecule and another molecule.
Correct. Intermolecular forces is the right answer.
What type of intermolecular force is present in hydrofluoric acid F?
Bravo. Hydrogen bonds is the answer.
H2 has what kind of intermolecular force?
Well done. Dipole-dipole is the right choice.
What are some examples of intermolecular forces mentioned in the text?
Nice work. You chose hydrogen bonds, and it is correct. Identify the state of matter with the strongest intermolecular forces. Solid response. Solid is a valid choice.
What is the term for the attractive forces between nonpolar molecules?
Well reasoned. Van der Waals forces is the correct choice.
What type of intermolecular force is depicted in the picture attached?
You're right. London dispersion forces is the correct answer.
Dipole-dipole forces can be formed by which type of moleculed compound?
Smart pick. Polar molecules or compounds is the correct choice. Which of the following forces are found between two nonpolar molecules? Correct response. London dispersion force is the most accurate answer.
Which is the stronger intermolecular force present in A2, Bert and Cli2?
Clear logic. Your choice dispersion is sound and 100% true. Which intermolecular force results from a hydrogen bonded to O, F, or N? Strong choice. Hydrogen bonding is the right answer. What are the forces of attraction holding helium atoms together called? Excellent choice. London dispersion forces is the right answer. Which of the following is not considered an intermolecular force? Good job. Your answer ionic bonding works well here.
What determines the melting and boiling points of molecular substances?
Perfect. Strength of intermolecular forces is the correct choice. Which type of intermolecular force is responsible for the shape of DNA? Well picked.
Hydrogen bonding is the correct answer.
Which of the following compounds can form intermolecular hydrogen bonds?
Right choice. Ray is the best answer.
Which intermolecular force between molecules of Cyclylux-2 is the strongest?
Smart pick. Dipole-dipole forces is the correct choice.
The strength of intermolecular forces from the ionic or covalent bond is.
Exactly. Weaker makes sense and it is right choice.
What type of force is between two molecules and creates temporary bonds?
You got it? Your choice intermolecular force is right.
What are the intermolecular forces of attraction for nonpolar molecules?
Right again. Dispersion forces is a valid answer.
What type of intermolecular force occurs in a sample of ionic compounds? Valid point. Ion-ion attractions is true. In a dash, intermolecular forces hold the individual particles in place.
Excellent choice. Solid is the right answer.
To us, which substance in the table has the strongest intermolecular forces?
Nice work. You chose HF and it is correct. Which of the following intermolecular forces is generally the strongest? Perfect. Hydrogen bonding is the correct choice.
What is the main type of intermolecular attraction in hydrogen chloride? Smart move. Dipole-dipole attraction is an accurate answer.
What type of intermolecular force would be present in potassium bromide? Well done. Ionic bonding is the right choice. Nickel dissolved in water will exhibit what type of intermolecular forces?
Correct. Ion dipole is the right answer. What type of molecule only experiences London dispersion forces?
Nicely done. Nonpolar molecule is a solid answer.
Which of the following molecules contains only London dispersion forces?
Excellent. C4 is a brilliant choice. The alkanols have higher melting points than their comparable alkanes do.
Correct response. Hydrogen bonding is the most accurate answer.
Which type of intermolecular force is present in all molecules and atoms?
Clear logic. Your choice dispersion force is sound and 100% true.
Dry ice sublimes on heating because the forces are.
Great job. Forces between temporary dipoles is the accurate answer.
Which substance has the strongest dispersion forces between its molecules? Sharp thinking. I2 is the right choice. Which of the following bonds requires the least amount of energy to break?
Or
You chose intermolecular bonds, and it is correct. H2 and 3 and E are examples of molecule that all have which strong force? Solid response. Hydrogen bond is a valid choice.
an intermolecular force that exists between a polar and non-polar molecule.
On track. Dipole, induced dipole is the correct answer.
Which of the following is the strongest type of intermolecular attraction?
Great thinking. Hydrogen bond is the right choice. What is the primary force responsible for the surface tension of a liquid? Bravo! Hydrogen bonding is the answer. Which intermolecular force is the weakest and caused by temporary dipoles? Good thinking.
London dispersion force is the right answer.
Which substance would have the weakest intermolecular forces of attraction?
Well reasoned. GH4 is the correct choice.
What is the type of intermolecular force present in trifluoromethane, CHEF3?
You're right. Dipole-dipole forces is the correct answer.
Which is the second strongest intermolecular force after hydrogen bonding?
Nice selection. Dipole-dipole forces is the correct and valid answer.
The main intermolecular forces occurring between two nonpolar molecules is...
Strong choice. London dispersion forces is the right answer.
What type of intermolecular forces increase with increasing molecular mass?
Good job. Your answer, London dispersion forces, works well here.
The strength of the intermolecular attraction dash with increasing distance.
Smart move. Decreases is an accurate answer.
What is the primary type of intermolecular force present in a sample of F?
Great job. Hydrogen bonding is the accurate answer.
Which noble gas will have the strongest van der Waals forces between atoms?
Excellent choice. Car is the right answer.
Which of the following properties is not affected by intermolecular forces?
Good thinking. Color is the right answer.
What intermolecular forces of attraction does methylamine exhibit?
Correct. Hydrogen bonding is the right answer.
Melting and boiling points depend on thermal energy and the strength of dash.
Perfect. Intermolecular forces is the correct choice.
Intermolecular forces are responsible for which of the following properties?
Nice work. You chose state of matter and it is correct.
Dash intermolecular forces cause liquids to have dash boiling points.
Good job. Your answer strong. High works well here.
Which test would be used to determine the strength of intermolecular forces?
Bravo. Melting point is the answer.
In which type of intermolecular force do ions interact with polar molecules?
Well reasoned. Ion-dipole interactions is the correct choice.
Give an example of an application of intermolecular forces in everyday life. Valid point. Evaporation is true. Which of the following intermolecular forces is broken when water is boiled?
Strong choice. Hydrogen bonds is the right answer.
Which intermolecular force is responsible for the unique properties of water?
On track. Hydrogen bonding is the correct answer.
What is the predominant intermolecular force in a sample of CH3?
Nice selection. Hydrogen bonding is the correct and valid answer.
The amount of energy it takes to stretch or increase the surface of a liquid.
Well done. Surface tension is the right choice.
What is the primary type of intermolecular force in water, Dina, and proteins?
Excellent.
Hydrogen bond is a brilliant choice.
Which of these typically do not increase when intermolecular forces increase?
Clear logic. Your choice evaporation is sound and 100% true.
Which intermolecular force is present in a sample of NaCl dissolved in water?
Solid response. Ion-dipole forces is a valid choice.
What type of IMF increases with increasing molecular weight?
Smart pick. London dispersion forces is the correct choice.
What is the strongest type of intermolecular force between chlorine molecules?
You got it. Your choice LDF is right.
Which of the following compound possesses the strongest intermolecular forces?
Nicely done. Ceph6 is a solid answer. Dipole-dipole forces are stronger than dash and weaker than dash interactions.
Exactly. London dispersion, hydrogen bonding makes sense, and it is right choice.
Which intermolecular force is due to the formation of an instantaneous dipole?
Great thinking. Dispersion forces is the right choice.
In order for a substrate to interact with an enzyme, a dash must take place.
You chose intermolecular attraction, and it is correct. What is the strongest intermolecular force between molecules of carbon dioxide? You're right. Dispersion forces is the correct answer. Which of the following liquids exhibits intermolecular hydrogen bonding forces?
Right choice. Ray is the best answer.
Which of the following substances is held together by London dispersion forces? Well picked. Methane is the correct answer.
Which intermolecular force is most significant in ionic compounds or solutions?
Correct response. Ion dipole is the most accurate answer.
Which intermolecular force increases with increasing size of the electron cloud? Right again. London forces is a valid answer.
Which of the following molecules predominantly consists of dipole-dipole forces?
Sharp thinking. I-cell is the right choice. What is the electrostatic attraction between two oppositely charged ions called? Sharp thinking. Intramolecular force is the right choice. Which molecule has the strongest intermolecular forces? Great job. HF is the accurate answer. What force explains the ability for water molecules to dissolve ionic compounds? Nice work. You chose molecule ion attraction, and it is correct. It is a force of attraction between charged particles, ion, and a polar molecule. Smart pick. Ion dipole is the correct choice. What causes temporary dipoles in molecules, leading to London dispersion forces? Right again. Constant motion of electrons is a valid answer. Which of the following is not an example of intermolecular forces of attraction? Clear logic. Your choice covalent bonding is sound and 100% true. Which intermolecular forces exist between the CO2 molecules in dry ice, CO2? Correct. London dispersion forces is the right answer. What type of intermolecular force that involves molecules with permanent dipole? Bravo. Dipole-dipole force is the answer. What are the most important intermolecular forces found between water molecules?
You got it. Your choice hydrogen bonding is right.
Water has an unusually high boiling point for a molecular compound because it has solid response. Hydrogen bonding is a valid choice. Which of the following diatomic molecules has the strongest van der Waals forces? Good job. Your answer I too works well here. Which type of intermolecular force results from the constant motion of electrons?
Excellent. London dispersion is a brilliant choice.
The creation of opposite charges at either end of the molecule is said to be dash.
Exactly. Dipole makes sense and it is right choice.
Which of the following molecules has dipole-dipole forces as its strongest force?
Great thinking with goods is the right choice.
What is the strongest type of intermolecular force one H2's molecule will exhibit?
Strong choice. Dipole-dipole attraction is the right answer.
Which intermolecular force results from the differing charges of ionic compounds?
You're right. Ion dipole is the correct answer.
In which substance is the dominant intermolecular force London dispersion forces?
Correct response. CH4 is the most accurate answer.
Which intermolecular force is characterized by partially oppositely charged ions?
Good thinking. Dipole-dipole is the right answer.
Which intermolecular force is the only imp present between two nonpolar molecules?
Nice selection. London dispersion forces is the correct and valid answer.
The dash the intermolecular forces, the more molecules will enter the vapor phase.
Right choice. Weaker is the best answer.
The strongest intermolecular force between molecules of hydrogen fluoride is?
You chose hydrogen bonding, and it is correct.
Dash have the strongest intermolecular forces of attraction in covalent compounds.
Valid point. Hydrogen bonds is true.
The strongest intermolecular force present between molecules of Mg-bar2 and C66 is?
Well reasoned. Ion-induced dipole is the correct choice.
Which type of intermolecular force is the strongest? See reading package pages 2-4.
Nicely done. Hydrogen bonding is a solid answer.
Between which of the following molecules would dipole-induced dipole forces exist? Perfect. HCl and N2 is the correct choice.
Water has a higher boiling point than most polar covalent compounds because it has.
Well picked. Hydrogen bonding is the correct answer. Select the state of matter in which intermolecular forces are not acting upon it. Smart move. Gas is an accurate answer.
Hydrogen bonds are the strongest type of intermolecular force. What is the weakest?
On track. Dispersion is the correct answer. Identify the intermolecular force that occurs between two polar molecules. Excellent choice. Dipole-dipole is the right answer. Which of the following hydrocarbons would have the strongest intermolecular forces? Well done. Seda 18 is the right choice. How you will get all these quiz questions in PDF books format. Bravo! Contact Narayan Chengder is the answer.